The man's days often blended into one another, quiet and predictable. He was 50 years old, a bus driver who knew every turn of the streets he drove daily, and yet felt lost in the routine. The city moved around him, full of voices, laughter, and people with destinations, while he sat behind the wheel, guiding others to where they needed to be, but never quite sure where his own life was heading. His home was a modest apartment where silence greeted him each night, a silence so heavy it seemed to echo his own doubts. Sometimes he wondered if he mattered at all. He wasn't famous, wealthy, or someone people remembered. To most, he was just the man who opened the bus doors and nodded them inside. In those quiet hours alone, he feared that his life would vanish without leaving even the faintest trace, as though he were a stone sinking unseen into a deep river. One chilly evening, while walking home after finishing his shift, he noticed a small figure standing near the corner of a deserted street. A boy, no older than 7 or 8, with eyes wide and searching, clutching a small backpack as though it were his only anchor. The boy looked frightened, shuffling his feet as cars sped past without slowing. The man slowed his steps. He could have walked on. He was tired, worn from the day, and all he wanted was the comfort of his chair and a simple meal. But something in the boy's eyes, a trembling mix of fear and hope, pulled at him. He approached gently, careful not to startle him, and asked where his parents were. The boy shook his head, eyes filling with tears, unable to find the words. In that moment, the man felt a familiar ache inside. He remembered his own childhood, how he too had once felt invisible and lost in a world too big. He knelt, lowering himself to the boy's level, and assured him he would be safe. Without hesitation, he took the boy's small hand in his own and promised to help him find his way home. The walk was slow, guided only by the boy's faint memories of street names and a familiar corner shop. The man's weariness faded into a quiet determination, each step filled with a sense of purpose he hadn't felt in years. At last, they reached a small house where a frantic mother rushed out, tears streaming as she embraced her son. Her gratitude poured out in words he barely heard, for his eyes lingered on the boy's face, no longer filled with fear, but with relief and trust. That night, as he returned to his apartment, the silence felt different. For the first time in a long while, he felt that perhaps, in some small way, his existence mattered. The following days passed with their usual rhythm: early mornings, crowded buses, and long stretches of silence. Yet something lingered in the man's heart, like a small ember refusing to fade. Helping the lost boy had left him with a strange warmth, a quiet reminder that even in his ordinary life, he could make a difference. Still, doubts crept in when the routine wrapped itself around him again. Driving the same streets, watching strangers board and leave, without ever remembering his face. He wondered if that night had really mattered at all. A single act of kindness seemed so small against the endless tide of the world. Perhaps, he thought, it was like tossing a pebble into the ocean ripples that disappeared before anyone noticed. But every time he recalled the boy's trembling hand in his, or the way the child's eyes shifted from fear to trust, something inside him softened. He found himself replaying the moment when the boy's mother had rushed forward, her voice breaking with gratitude. Those images felt like fragile treasures he kept hidden inside, proof that he was not entirely invisible. On his route, he began noticing small details he used to overlook. The weary young woman balancing grocery bags with a baby in her arms. The old man who sat in the same seat every morning, staring out at the horizon. The teenagers laughing too loudly, hiding their uncertainties behind the noise. All of them carried their own silent struggles, and for the first time, the man realized how alike they all were, lost in different ways, just trying to find their way home. One evening, sitting alone in his dimly lit apartment, he reflected on that thought. Maybe kindness was not about grand gestures or recognition. Maybe it was about moments like these, quiet, unseen, and easily forgotten by others, but powerful enough to shift the weight inside a single heart. Even if no one remembered, the kindness itself lived on, carried forward in ways he could not see. Yet, despite these reflections, there remained an ache of uncertainty. He longed to believe his life had true meaning, that he had not simply drifted through the years unseen. Sometimes he feared that one day he would collapse behind the wheel of his bus, and the world would move on without pause. His small apartment would be emptied, his seat filled by another driver, and his existence erased as though he had never been there at all. He closed his eyes and whispered a silent hope into the stillness, that when his time came, Something he had done, no matter how small, would carry forward, like a candle passed from one hand to another, giving light to someone else in the darkness. He did not yet know that his wish had already taken root. Years slipped quietly through the man's life, as years often do. His hair grayed, his body slowed, yet the rhythm of driving his bus remained constant. It was a life of small routines and quiet evenings, punctuated by fleeting moments of warmth when he thought back to that lost boy. Sometimes, in the solitude of his apartment, he wondered where the child was now. Did he remember the stranger who once took his hand and led him safely home? Or had the memory faded into the blur of childhood? One winter morning, as frost clung to the windows, his life took an abrupt turn. While on his shift, a sharp pain gripped his chest. It came suddenly, fierce and unrelenting, stealing his breath. The world around him blurred as the bus screeched to a stop. Panic filled the passenger's eyes, but for him, everything slowed into a heavy silence. He was rushed to the hospital, sirens wailing like a cry against the stillness of his fading strength. On the edge of consciousness, he thought of the boy, the small hand he once held, the trust in those eyes. A whisper passed through his mind. Had that small act truly mattered? Or would his life now end, as he had always feared, quietly, forgotten, without meaning? Then came the blinding lights of the operating room, the steady voices of doctors and nurses, and the cold sting of uncertainty. In those fragile moments between life and death, he drifted into darkness. Hours later, when he awoke, weak but breathing, a face appeared beside him. The doctor leaned close, eyes kind and steady, and spoke gently of survival. But as the man studied the young doctor's features, something stirred within him, a memory resurfacing with the force of a tide. The eyes. Those same eyes he had seen long ago, wide with fear beneath the glow of a streetlight. The doctor noticed his trembling recognition and softly revealed the truth. He was the boy, the lost child from years ago. And now, grown into a man, he had guided the one who once guided him, bringing him back from the brink of death. Tears welled in the man's eyes, rolling freely down his cheeks. In that moment, he understood with a clarity so profound it silenced every doubt he had ever carried. His life had mattered. His kindness had not vanished into the ocean. It had grown, returned, and saved him when he needed it most. Lying there, he felt no fear of being forgotten. Instead, he felt the quiet peace of someone who finally knew that even the smallest act could ripple through time, carrying light into places unseen. Life often moves in circles, weaving connections we cannot see until the right moment arrives. The man had once believed his life was small, unseen, and easily forgotten. Yet one simple act, taking a child's hand and leading him home, proved to be the very thread that tied his life to another, bringing him purpose and salvation. This story reminds us that kindness is never wasted. It plants seeds that may grow in places we cannot imagine. If this story touched your heart, I invite you to like, share, comment your thoughts, and subscribe for more stories that inspire reflection.